I promised that this government would serve people like you.
We're here because we love our country.
Shut up a minute!
Hi, Neil Shorten here. Now, please do join me for an exclusive chat with a man who literally is the kingmaker. He is, of course, the man that's seen so much political intrigue, power, and more importantly, passion. Remember though, Graham?
That's right, Neil. If you miss it, you miss out.
So don't miss Sir Graham Brady today on the old show. Sir Graham Brady, thank you so much for coming in to see me today and about your fabulous new book, Kingmaker. Before you say another word, I have to say, love the front cover. And I just think that tells you everything about what you went through in your role. So for those that don't know your role, just explain what did you do?
Well, I was chairman of the 1922 committee, which is the Conservative Parliamentary Party, really. So we had a number of functions. Mostly it's about trying to keep communication between the party leadership and the backbenches, the ordinary MPs, in both directions. But also we had a role in votes of confidence, whether a prime minister or a party leader is disposed of or not, and then in running the election to choose a successor. And going through 5 Conservative prime ministers in an 8-year period, I ended up in a role which is normally behind the scenes being really quite public quite a lot of the time.
What's fascinating is you did become the public face because it was interchangeable. When you say the votes of no confidence with the letters, for those that don't know, how does that evolve? You know, like, do people come up to you or is it a ballot box? How does all that work?
Well, I mean, this is a process whereby if 15% of the Parliamentary Conservative Party write letters to the chairman of the 1922 committee asking for a vote of confidence in the leader, then the chairman has to inform the leader and then organise a vote. So this became a hot topic of speculation in Parliament and in the media for several years, as people were constantly trying to guess how many letters have been submitted, whether we were almost at the 15% or not. I would have times when I'd be in a supermarket and the person behind me in the queue would be counting how many items I had on the conveyor belt, and I'd say, "Oh, you've got 36, have you?" or whatever. I mean, it was all very good-natured, but could become a little bit tedious. And then, of course, because I decided, I think rightly, that it was impossible ever to say anything about how many letters there are, because if you give anything at all away, it feeds the speculation. So if I don't say anything at all, then anybody else can make up whatever they like. So we had occasions where the Sunday Times would announce that I was 2 letters short of the target when I wasn't. I had a colleague earlier this year, Sir Simon Clarke, who said Graham Brady's now got 50 letters. I think 53 was the threshold. At that point, I think there were 9.
You touched upon the Platinum Jubilee. You are Sir Graham Brady. You've got a lovely picture of your investiture with Prince William. Talk me through that. What's that like when you get that, Graham? Because, I mean, it's something that we will, ordinaries won't know anything about, But how exciting is that?
I mean, the whole thing is exciting. I mean, it was amusing, actually, when Theresa May first became Prime Minister and I announced that she'd been elected to the Parliamentary Party in a big committee room in the House of Commons. And Theresa stood up and she said, "Thank you, Sir Graham." Well, I think it was a slip of the tongue, but I wasn't Sir Graham.
Oh, right.
And of course there was hilarity in the room, and my colleague said my face was a picture at that point. So I didn't know how to take it. But then when I was ultimately knighted, it's the most magical day, and it's a wonderful family occasion because you can take normally I think 3 guests with you into the ceremony. I think I managed to get a 4th, so I had my mother-in-law there as well, and it's a lovely thing. And of course you're very nervous because just silly things like how you kneel before the sword.
Well, I noticed they've got the kneeling cushion now, haven't they? Which is lovely.
They have, but for when you're being knighted, they have one that's got a wooden pole at the side, so you can hold on to that, so you're less likely to fall over. And you're coached. You have a little rehearsal before you go through, and they take the knights, dames, and CBEs, which are the more sort of senior honours. they hive you off from the others and take those people for a rehearsal, and particularly for knights and dames. Then, because you've got the kneeling to do with this odd stool, they show you where to put this foot and then where to put the knee down and what you do when you stand up and so
That
on.
must be the nerve-wracking bit, though, remembering all
Absolutely.
of that bit. It's not the actual, it's the bit, isn't it?
Yes.
Like, ooh, you know.
Yes.
We touched on the Queen of the Platinum Jubilee. You've met Her Majesty the Queen, Our Lady Queen. What were your memories of her? Because I just thought she was
Of course, the loss of Her Majesty the Queen has come as a huge shock, I think, for all of us. Much as we knew that she'd been unwell and we knew that she was 96 years old, somehow I think we all thought that she would go on. And I know everybody was really taken aback and shocked by the news yesterday evening.
She's a terrific woman, but I never got to know her. I'd met her on maybe 3 or 4 occasions over the years, but always at receptions for members of Parliament, and I just felt so sorry for her. It must be the most awful part of the job when you're just greeting a succession of people, exchanging a few words. You don't really get to have a proper conversation, and then a little bit of mingling afterwards. But I always think the royals must go through an awful lot of very, very dull public service that they have to do. But the Queen was, of course, magnificent in her dedication to that public service, right the way to the very end. And of course, she was there to ask Liz Truss to form a government, and then, of course, very soon after that, she passed away. And it's very hard not to think that she hung on to perform that last important public duty.
I think we all thought that, Graham. You know, I think we all, I mean, what I always thought about that as well, I felt really sorry for Liz Truss, because suddenly that big historical event is now thrown on her shoulders. Not only is she grappling with this number 10 role, Boris would have been a better person to put all of that together, you know what I mean? And yet she's got this role, which is now part of history. You've got Penny Mordaunt involved and all this sort of stuff. It must have been a colossal time at that, but you know, to just deal with what was going on, because the world stopped, didn't it?
Yes. I mean, it was bizarre. I recount in the book that my wife and I were in Gibraltar at the time. We'd gone out for the celebrations of the Gibraltar National Day, and it was really very moving, because Gibraltar is so passionate about its Britishness that the whole place, when we arrived, was decked out in red and white, the colours of the Gibraltar flag. Overnight, they were all removed, and black swags were on all the lampposts and on all the shop fronts, and the place just transformed. And we then went to it was a 96-gun salute at the naval base. It was all quite remarkable, and quite a time.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as you say, this is what's great about your book. It's living history. And when somebody picks that book up in 100 years' time, it's your recollections of those moments. You mentioned also a good line in there about an underground entrance. For those that don't know, 10 Downing Street, I think, is a magical place because, you know, whatever, it's the epicenter of our political world. When you first went into Downing Street, you know, the first time you walked through the door, Graham, what were your memories? Because, of course, you know, we've seen it when we were kids on the news, and everything's different when you see it in real life, isn't it? It's not you know.
Well, I mean, the first time I went in would have been as a student, and when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. And I suppose I mostly was conscious of the importance of the meeting that I was going to have, and the fact that I was going to see Margaret Thatcher. But I guess I would have noticed then, as on the many subsequent visits, it's a peculiarly British thing, that you go through the front door of a Georgian townhouse into a sort of fairly down at heel hallway, where there's a security guard standing there who checks that you're on the list of people who are meant to be coming in.
You've got in the door, but now it's checking.
Tells you should put your mobile phone in the rack over there so that you don't take pictures or record conversations or whatever. And then you maybe get sent to a sofa just around the corner as a little waiting area in the hall, or there's a little waiting room. And I always would choose, if I could, to sit on the sofa, because then you saw everybody else who was coming and going. for however long you were there waiting, and you might bump into lots of people and have interesting chats. But I think people would imagine that there would be much more glitz,
Grandeur or whatever.
grandeur, a bit of glamour to it. But no, the carpet's a little bit threadbare, and it's all expense spared.
But you can imagine Mrs. Thatcher wouldn't care about that, though. She wouldn't be bothered about that, would she? She'd be more bothered about doing the job.
I think she would have had a very strong sense that public money should be looked after, and that spending it on her carpet in her hallway probably wasn't the most important issue.